Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. Your host, a behavioral scientist and bachelor, talks to leading experts and successful singles about living solo and living well. Travel more, make things, sleep in when you want to. Here's the playbook for the person who is unapologetically unattached. Now, please welcome Dr. Peter McGraw.
Welcome back. This episode brings together a nearly divorced man, Kevin Nolte, and a friend, Mark Fernie, who has a business that helps divorced men and women, but mostly men, get back in the game. Mark uses his box of rocks intake process as a starting point to help Kevin. The conversation's a lot of fun, especially when we talk about physical makeovers, as well as a bit uplifting as we see Kevin's enthusiasm about pursuing the advice he's received. For example, Kevin texted me the next day to tell me he had gotten back on the treadmill. Quick announcement, I've launched a solo message board on the solo page of petermcgraw.org. Go there and sign up if you want to talk about this episode or anything else solo related. And I'm happy to say that Solo has a sponsor, Rapture Masks. That's Rapture with a W, like wrap it up. It's a fully machine washable antimicrobial mask. Use the promo code RaptureSolo at rapturemasks.com to get your solo discount. Okay? Well, here we go. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Let's get started. Welcome to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. I'm Peter McGraw. Today's first guest is Kevin Nolte. Kevin is a marketer, author, and YouTube creator who has 4 children and lives in Pennsylvania. He was one of the early YouTube web-lebrities with more than 1,000 videos seen more than 250 million times. Known as Nalts on YouTube, his videos include pranks, vlogs, and short comedies. He's the author of the book Beyond Viral and has written plays and acted in many. By day, he works for an agency as a VP of strategy where he helps pharmaceutical brands connect with doctors and patients. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Peter. Great to be here.
We're joined by Mark Fernie. Mark is not only one of my closest friends, he's a relationship whisperer. Holding a master's degree in counseling and administration from the University of Maryland, he's been helping people move past divorce and relationship breakups for almost a decade. At age 35, Mark was one of the first of his friends and mine, and the first ever in his family to get divorced. He quickly realized how little support there was for newly single guys and now works with men and women across the country to get back in the game. With his new partner, he was a guest on episode 29 of I'm Not Joking that was titled Mark and Steph's Calendar of Fun. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Is it still the most listened to I'm Not Joking podcast, by the way?
No, Anthony Jeselnik has surpassed you too.
Give him a year.
So, Kevin, we're here to help.
Wonderful.
We are here to help.
Thank you.
I want you to start. First of all, can you tell the crowd how we got to know each other? And then just talk a little bit about where you are, how you got here, and how we can help you get back in the game.
Super. Well, I met you because I stalked you, having read a Fast Company article and just being absolutely intrigued by the notion of academia and humor meeting. I thought I've got to get myself to one of your conferences, and the way I figured I could do that is if I offered to give my own presentation diagnosing the top 100 YouTube videos. So it's kind of fun to be back in touch in a totally different type of discussion.
That was like 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah, I would probably back when I was famous.
So Kevin, and I've always called him Nalts because I got to know him through his YouTube celebrity status, drove from Pennsylvania to Boston like on a whim. I thought part of it was, and we met at a humor conference, which is one of the dullest affairs you can ever go to.
Oh, not for me. I was intrigued.
So you responded to a call on Twitter where I was looking for a newly or nearly divorced man looking to get back in the game based upon a conversation that Mark and I were having about his business. I was basically looking for a reason to get Mark on the pod because I know he's going to promote the hell out of this thing.
That's transparent. It's very transparent of
Sure.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your non-celebrity status, your personal status, and how you got here?
Yeah, super. So I was married in 96 and have 4 wonderful kids. They're all now one's in high school and 3 are in college. Was separated in the end of 2018. So we're still going through the whole divorce process, and I wouldn't wish that upon an enemy, but I suppose it's better. It's been better than I expected.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay, and so you are 51?
Yeah, something like that.
Yes, okay. Maybe you feel younger now? Maybe you feel
yeah.
older now?
That's why I'm glad this is audio and I don't have to worry about Botox.
Don't worry, I'm the oldest face on this call, so don't worry.
Great.
Okay, and so what's going well and what's not going well? If you could kind of summarize those things before I turn it over to Mark.
Yeah, it's funny because I get lost in my own head and I don't sort of kick to wide shot. So that's a good question. So what's going well, fortunately, is that the kids are adjusting, I think, as well as somebody can, going through a traumatic event like this. And I'm blessed for that. For the most part, my relationship with my ex is fairly civil, especially when it comes to the kids. So we talk frequently to make sure we're doing whatever we can in their best interest. And while I'm not, thrilled about all the nuances and legalities of divorce, that's definitely not the funnest thing I've experienced. I think I probably expected it to be even worse. And I, according to my therapist anyway, I appear to have come a long way in the nearly 2 years since the separation. So
that's good. You and I are nearly the same age. So we grew up, and our first experience with divorce, if our parents didn't get divorced, was watching Kramer versus Kramer.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you're just like, oh, it's horrible. Oh my God. And then my second experience for me was my parents, and my third experience was Mark's divorce. Okay. And so 2 out of 3 were terrible, I would say. Well, that's great. So, Mark, how about you just jump in here? Tell us a little bit more about yourself, your philosophy, and then I really would like you to take Kevin through kind of a short version of your intake. If
Sure. So, well, you did a good introduction. I wasn't caught completely off guard, but I think once the reality set in that I was going to go through that divorce, I struggled with what the right way to handle everything would be. Like, when do you date again? How do you let people know, both your family, your friends? How do you get support? Who do you confide in? And I was really lost. I did some Googling. I certainly got into therapy, so I was glad to hear that you said that. But I really, as I chatted more with Pete and with other friends, unless you go through it sometimes, it's hard to really empathize in the ways that you need that empathy when you're struggling with a divorce. No offense, Pete, you were a good friend. You were a good friend.
I wasn't that happy.
So I think what led me to this line of work is that after I went through that, and then just like life happens, I would have more and more friends. Maybe it's my friend group, I don't know. But they would end up going through a divorce or a separation or difficult relationship. And it's not just a marriage divorce, but even a long-term breakup can be pretty traumatic and need some support through that. And so I found myself reaching out to them, grabbing a beer, and just walking them through and having a listening ear and just kind of throwing ideas, making sure they had the right supports, those types of things. And so that's kind of how I got into this work. My graduate work was mainly in higher education administration, but I had a concentration in counseling back in my graduate degree. So I was working at a counseling center there at the University of Maryland. And then for the last 20 years, my day job also has to do with student affairs work. So working with 18 to 30-year-olds on all sorts of issues. And so a lot of time was spent chatting, and not surprisingly, a lot of their issues had to do with relationships.
Yes,
right?
Lots of breakups.
How it is.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my background. And as far as we're doing this a little off kilter just to make it for a good podcast, but normally I would have sent someone like a worksheet, so to speak. And so they would be thinking about these things before we would ever meet either virtually or in person, to kind of have some answers to reflect on what they've gone through. And so there are 5 big rocks that I usually do. Is this a time to share that, Pete, or do you need more background?
In one moment, I think there's a critical thing that we want to address, which is what you're describing. Your business, Mark, I think, is a much needed offering in the workplace, and excuse me, not in the workplace, in the marketplace. And what I'd like the two of you to address is, what are the resources for people getting divorced, especially men who are getting divorced? I'll tell you my limited searching as I was thinking about solo and doing this sort of competitive analysis. I did look at divorce, and I found there were lots and lots of stuff for women, support groups, books, and so on. And I was surprised, maybe not surprised, but I noticed how little there were for men. And so I'm curious, in both of your experiences, what is out there besides Mark? I mean, we know nothing good there's nothing out there better than Mark, but what else is out there besides Mark?
I can speak to that, okay. At least from my perspective. I mean, I gravitated quickly to other people who had experienced divorce, and a few of them told me, pay this forward. I was so gracious that they offered counsel, and they said, pay it forward. There's a divorce club. I went to, for a very short period, one of those religious divorce clubs, and that was a nightmare. And
why?
Then I've listened to...
Why?
It was a nightmare because there were a few people in there, they were taking it for the 4th year. And one day I showed up and half of the people were not attending. In fact, even the teacher was not there, and there was a substitute. And the class, unbeknownst to me, that topic was basically all about how religion shuns, the Christian church shuns divorcees. And so I sat through that for a little while. That was the last one I attended, because that's the last thing. My parents are deeply faithful, wonderful marriage. I've got a brother who's a priest. My dad was a deacon. So I didn't need to be reminded that this was inconsistent with my own value system and spirituality. But then I listened to podcasts. I probably got a dozen books, some of which I've kept and some of which I've thrown away, because a lot of them are really around just tough guy making sure they don't get screwed in a divorce, economically.
Men's rights type stuff.
Yeah, and it was little hacks and that sort of thing, and a lot of fear mongering. So I found very little. The podcasts that resonated with me were indeed women. And after a while of listening to those things, I kind of was like eating candy corn. They're tasty for a little while, and then you just don't want to ever see another candy corn for a while. I just got to the point where I just wasn't feeling like it was good. I realized, okay, I'm not alone. There are other people. Here are the topics I need to be thinking about. But after a while, I just got tired of thinking and talking about divorce.
I see.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's helpful. I mean, my experience was somewhat similar. And again, this was 10 years ago. And so, podcasts
before the internet,
thing, right?
Yeah. The internet
and I think, you can find things, right? I'm not sure how good they are. There's just like your experience with the faith-based men's group. There's all sorts of those types of organizations, for better or for worse. I was chatting with my significant other about this the other night, and sometimes I think, well, what do I bring that's unique, or what's what sets me apart from others? And she's a marine biologist, and she said, well, listen. She said, if I started thinking about all the other marine biologists in the world and how I compare myself to them and now she's a superstar. She's at the top of the list regardless.
Yeah.
She'd be like, she's like, there's no way I would, so there's a perspective check about what I bring probably may not be completely in line with what, you've seen on websites or other things. I just do it in the sense of this very empathic, ethic of care that basically says, hey, I've been through this. I think I have some insights and can shed some light in your situation. And how do we get you back in the game? How do we build your confidence? Because that's a huge issue. How do we tighten things up for you. I mean, I describe myself and the work I do in this field not so much like I'm not going to be a great person for a 22-year-old who wants to have sex more frequently with strangers. And I'm also not going to be really helpful for someone who has never had 2 or 3 dates in a row with the same person, right? I'm here for someone who's been out of the game, who is in their mid-20s, mid-30s, mid-40s, 50s, who hasn't dated in 20 years like yourself, and say, okay, what can we do about these kind of 5 starting blocks, and what are some insights that I can provide to get you out there with confidence and figure out what your next move is? And is that another life partner? Is that someone you date for a few years? Or is that just a place that you can walk into a room with confidence and feel good about yourself and what you're bringing to a conversation?
Okay, so let's get to those 5 things. And I'm going to add something to Mark because he's not completely modest, but he's being modest. And that is the thing that Mark, I think, does well is he has, I talk about, he has the full range of masculinity. That is that Mark has that confidence, assertiveness that we often identify as a classical male figure. But then he also has the balance of an easygoingness and a sensitivity and empathy. And that he can push and pull those levers as needed, depending who his clients are. And I see this because the way he does this with his friends. You know, so from going and playing golf and doing prop bets and doing March Madness trips to he's the number one call when things go really wrong in that sense. So enough of the free advertising for
I also have my own hype guy. What's not to like about that?
So let's let's go.
So here are the quick 5 things that I would say to think about, and I'm just going to say them, and then we're going to come back to them individually, and you can kind of give us a brief synopsis of kind of how you're feeling, Kevin, if that's okay.
You called them rocks earlier, which I think is really good marketing speak. So Mark's rocks.
Okay, box of rocks. So the first one is kind of how you're doing physically on the inside. So like exercise routine, health, eating habits, drinking, drugs, self-medication, like what people can't often see, like what's going in. That's one. The next one is like physically outside. So like an appearance. So face, clothing, hair, attitude, how you enter a room, that type of thing. The third one that I focus on would be social, like how are things with your support system, family, friends. Many men lack that friend group, especially, I think. We can chat more about that. Hobbies, taking trips, vacation, events. Like how do you gain that social wherewithal, and do you have that in your support circle, so to speak? The fourth is emotional. You've already mentioned seeing a therapist, which you've already checked a big box that many people, especially as I work with men, are a bit reluctant for whatever reason to do that. How are you feeling? Who are your like close, trusted advisors? Just like Pete said, I'm a person that people call in our friend group. Like, do you have that person you can lean on and you talk to? And then last one, and you've alluded to this in our early conversation as well, is just the logistics big rock as far as where are you with finalizing the paperwork? Where are you with figuring out how you co-parent in a divorce setting? Where are you professionally with your career and your job? How is this divorce kind of? So those are the 5 things that I normally would pass out or email to a client in a working, like a workshop, so they can be thinking and reflecting on these aspects before they even set foot on a Zoom call or in my office. So and Pete, I don't know how much time you want to spend on each one, if we're totally going to dig into Kevin and unravel all of his layers of the onion, or like what you envision for this podcast.
Yeah, and if we're out of time, we can skip the first rock about physical, because I'll just say disaster and we can move on.
No, okay, so here's what I think we should do is I think we should try to touch on all of these, but when you hear that list, Kevin, is there one in particular you feel like we should focus a little bit more on?
That's a good question. I mean, I think the social aspect, but I recognize that sort of that physical and sort of internal.
If you use
state.
The word disaster, we probably let's start with that one and lean into that one a little bit.
I invited that, didn't I?
And Kevin, the listeners aren't going to be able to see you, but we're on a video chat right now, so we can see each other.
Right.
you look okay.
Okay. All right.
You don't look like you're a disaster. And so I guess I would wonder, when you said physically I'm a disaster, were you talking about like the inside or the outside?
Well, I think so. They overlap a lot, but I see the distinction you've got between sort of the, how am I taking care of my body versus the attitude I project. Mm-hmm. And I think of them as sort of interlinked to the point where if you're not good inside, you're not going to project well. The interesting thing is I would have expected that I would be healthier now than ever. That seems to be the archetype you have, where you get these divorced people that are just like, absolutely. It's been really hard. I mean, I was in great shape like 5 years ago, and I just am dragging. Part of that's COVID, but I can't excuse it entirely that way. So that's probably, one of the areas I'm most concerned about. In the other areas, at least I've got a plan, or, I've made some progress.
Yeah. Yeah. And Pete talks about this on his podcast with, once you hit a 45, 50, 40, what was your threshold, Pete? There's some tipping point, so to speak, where, what was it, 22, your muscle mass
You're starting
changes.
to die. Yeah. What part am I starting to die?
I can't. I think it's at 40, men start losing 1% of their muscle mass every year.
Yeah.
And of course it's slow, but you think about after 10 years, you've lost 10% of your muscle mass. And so if your weight has stayed the same, it means you've gained 10 pounds of fat after 20 years, after 30 years. And then the big thing, of course, is as you get older and older, not having muscle mass is a real problem for the elderly because it protects you. You're less likely to fall when you're stronger, and then when you fall, you're more protected. But then also, let's be honest, if you're getting back in the game, and if you're interested in dating again, you're going to have to get naked with new people.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to be excited about how you feel and look with new partners. And I don't want to assume, actually, that you, Kevin, or anyone, that this is actually about trying to partner someone up again.
Right. Especially on a solo podcast.
Yes, exactly. I think you can do whatever you want with that thing. But the idea is that these rocks, I think, are important regardless of whether you ever want to get married again, whether you want to date seriously again, because these are fundamental things for living a remarkable life.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and you mentioned that you separated in like December or November of 2018.
Right.
So you've been, and I know separation comes with lots of definitions and there's sometimes back and forth and getting back together and breaking up and all of that. It's not always like a clear line or a delineation between the separation and the divorce, and paperwork takes a long time. So, if we were spending more time together, so to speak, we would probably dive into that a bit deeper, because I think where people are with coming, if you want to reference the 5 stages of grief and those types of things, we can do that. But I think it's important for the listener to really think that while you said that people sometimes like to get back in shape and suddenly turn into rock stars, athletically when they go through this breakup, that's true. That also does not always happen, as we all know from our...
It's a bifurcation.
It is.
You get some people who double down and get back into shape and all this stuff, and then you have a bunch of people who just drink a lot and eat crappy food, in part because they have all these new habits, right? They move into a new apartment. For some men, they don't cook. And now they're ordering in, and they're, you know what I mean? And some men, now you have that bottle of whiskey and it's right there, and it's tempting at the end of the night.
You don't have the accountability
to
your spouse, where basically you can start slipping into habits and, somebody's not going to slap your head.
Whiskey's fun. Yeah, I get it.
Now, you also mentioned the social piece, right? And the support. You mentioned kids, and I think as I've chatted with clients in the past, one of the things that they sometimes, and now that they have gone beyond and have gotten back into the game, and some actually are now remarried, they will turn back and say, I was really leaning on my kids emotionally more than I should have. I think there needs to be a clear delineation between when, this is why I put like social and emotional kind of neck close to each other, but clearly separated, because, your kids and even your friends, there's a reason why you pay a therapist what you pay a therapist, so you can go in and dump and say whatever you want to say, and they're going to listen. And you walk out that room, and they shut the door, and that relationship doesn't go beyond that hour for the most part. When you dump on your friend, or even worse on your child, it can have some damage.
Yeah, and you're putting a burden on them when they've already got their own. I mean, that's what, I early on, I remember thinking, well, I don't want to hold back. I want them to see that this is hard. But at the same time, you can't make them your therapist. I've seen that happen with other people. It's really sad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, hold on a second. We need to get a little bit deeper here. We're being a little bit superficial here, Kevin.
Dig.
So you talked about the physical stuff, the inside and the outside stuff. So like, what's going on? Where are the problem points?
So I think it's I'm always sort of busy with the kids and the career and everything else. Now I've got a job where I'm remote, even before COVID, right? And so I'm not commuting regularly. I don't have that sort of pattern of behavior. The first year was dark. I mean, a lot of nights just sitting on the couch, drinking, barely moving. Now, I'm in a new townhouse where the kids are here as often as they're not. So that helps a lot. I think I'm doing better on the sort of social, emotional, but something's been holding me back in terms of just getting good sleep hygiene, not drinking, eating better. And so I'm just trying to unpack that.
Okay. So some habits that you haven't, some bad habits to break and some.
Yeah, because you're by yourself sometimes and you just okay, is it drinking alone if I'm on a Zoom?
Mark,
we probably would define that differently. And I don't think it's drinking alone if you drink on a Zoom.
Okay.
So those are difficult things to address, and I think a lot of what I advise people to do is, like, Pete is a perfect example, and he's chatted about this certainly on his podcast. He sticks to a schedule. He's very regimented. He is just really trying to, if he deviates from that, he's deviating a bit while he's on his sabbatical, which I think has been a challenge for him. But he's got really strict rules about what he does when he wakes up, when he starts writing, when he exercises, and he likes the routine. He's like one of the more routine-driven people. And so if you work with a routine-driven person, then it makes sense to map that out. Like, what's realistic with your job? What's realistic with your kids as far as when you're with them? How do you work in travel and your social life? How do you move the needles in those ways if you need that routine? If you're more kind of laissez-faire and this is how I do things, then I think you really need to do a bit more reflection on what's worked for you in your past. I mean, clearly, if you've done everything that you just described with the YouTube being a web celebrity or whatever Pete called you, you've had success in life. You've had success in life. And so I think what I try to encourage clients to do is tap into where that success came from, how you figured out a strategy to succeed, and then you just convert that into what you're struggling with now to map out that pathway. And you're not going to go from 0 to a 6-pack in 6 months. It's going to take some time.
Can I add to that? I think that's a really insightful thing, which is sort of, so there's this sort of distinction that I see is like, there's some men who get divorced essentially because their wives realize they're still children and they have 2 kids and she doesn't want a third.
Yeah, that's me.
And that, I don't believe that, actually. I don't believe that's the case for you. And I feel bad for these guys because they're so far behind. Their growth has been so stunted because they let someone else take care of everything their whole life. Then there's the guys who it knocks them off balance, but they basically have their act together. And I think what Mark's point is, and my feeling is you're closer to the latter than the former. And if you apply sort of your professional principles, you have your professional act together to your personal life, that can allow you to do it. I do want to make a case, and I realize I'm a little bit the person who has the hammer and everything looks like a nail, is we always talk about routines for babies and for children and how they respond so well to those. And then suddenly we act like just because someone grown up, they don't need those anymore. And so I do think that when it comes to especially health and well-being stuff, habits are important because they eliminate the need for willpower. And so that's, and some of these things are just like, if you find that it's just that one drink at the end of the night is turning into 2 or 3, well, then maybe you don't have alcohol in the house. You know, like that's, and then the drink becomes a rare and special occasion when you're with a friend at a bar and not a routine, mundane thing at the end of the day.
Or you set restrictions, you set guidelines, you know, weekends only, you go a few weeks to repair your liver. You know, you can set things up like that. And that can be said for an exercise routine. That can be said for your addiction to French fries or eating unhealthy. You know, those are some of the things.
Indeed.
Yeah, I'm pretty good at like the all or I tend to do the all or nothing thing. Like when I was in shape, and again, like 5 years ago, better shape than I've been my whole life. You know, I was addicted. Mm-hmm. You know, it was routine. And then now it's like, okay, I'm such a mess, you know. So the whole baby step thing is probably something I need to think about.
And it's going to be slow. I mean, I especially as you get older, when you're 20 and you put on a little bit of weight in your freshman year of college and you come home for the summer, you can just whip yourself back into shape in 3 months.
Yeah.
But when you're out of shape at 51, it will honestly, it's going to take at least a year.
Yeah.
To start to really see those kinds of results. But the beautiful thing about the human body is it's predictable. You put good things in and you move it and it starts to look better.
Yeah. I was golfing one time with, I was probably around 30 and I think he was probably around 70. And we were chatting about life and I was picking up some golfing tips and wisdom. And he said, be careful. He said, you don't think it's a big deal when you put on 1 or 2 pounds over the course of a year. But you're 30, I'm 70. That's a 40-year difference. That's 80 pounds of weight that you're going to have added if you don't watch yourself. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
I definitely didn't have French fries that night.
Can we turn to the outside thing? Because one of the things, Kevin, I don't know if I warned you about this. I asked you for a photo of yourself, a full-length photo of yourself.
Uh-oh.
And
good thing it's a podcast.
Yes,
they're never going to follow. They're never going to hit the link. No one will ever do that.
I'm going to put it in the exhibits. So if you go to the blog post that accompanies this, you're going to see this full body photo of Kevin. He's wearing clothes.
With clothes on.
He has clothes on. And so I wanted to invite Mark to give you some encouraging
fashion tips. I know.
Encouraging
do that?
feedback about your outward packaging.
All right, so before we say this, let me just tell you, I know exactly why Pete is doing this and why he suggested it. Because what he's now going to do is parlay this little conversation with a before and after photo of Mark Fernie from before the divorce and after the divorce.
That will also be on the
exactly.
webpage.
This is why we've been friends for so long. I knew he would be doing this.
So, Mark, why don't you talk about your before and after photo before we talk about Kevin's before photo?
Sure. So, well, this speaks to kind of the social friend group and having someone. I mean, you talked about like tough love and tough guy type stuff earlier. But it speaks to you need someone in your corner who is going to give you feedback and is going to care for you and love you so much that they are going to tell you the things that no one else will tell you, right? And unfortunately, not a lot of people have those people in their lives, and some of those people they lost in the divorce. I mean, so I think it's a fascinating. It's a gift that not everyone has, and that's why I encourage people to reach out to people like me, to therapists, to people who, you know, big brothers do a good job of this sometimes, but not everyone has a big brother, or little brothers. So Pete, I remember it very clearly. He basically said, "It's time."
I put my hand on his shoulder, looked into his eyes, and said, "Mark,
deep into my eyes," and he said, "It's time. You need to cut your hair, and you need to stop wearing married man jeans."
Oh.
And so we actually went shopping together, and I spent more on that one pair of jeans, and I look great in them, I must say, than I probably spent on all the pairs of jeans combined in the last 10 years while I was
Peter, are they a sponsor? Do you want to name the brand?
I wish I could. We're open. We are open to sponsorships. Yes. We've had one sponsor, and it's a mask company called Rapture Masks.
Nice. But, very good. Nice plug.
The promo code is Rapture Solo. But
There we go.
I am open to having clothing sponsors as long as the clothes are not dad gene related.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I think what this leads. So I know we are trying to. I'm trying to summarize a lot of some of my best tips in one podcast, so to speak, to kind of help you and help the listeners. And so this speaks to this one kind of key takeaways from my work with past clients. One of the 5 bullets on that list is create, shape, make yourself into being someone worthy of someone else who's amazing, right? I mean, no one amazing is going to spend time with you if someone who you think is amazing. Like,
that ripping sound is Kevin pulling out a sheet of paper.
That's me taking notes. I'm on page 2.
Now on page 2. But I mean, no, I will be the first to say, and my friends will quickly be the second to say, I married so far up. My partner is such a rock star in so many ways. There is no way she would ever end up with someone like me if I didn't get my shit together and really created and made and shaped myself into someone that I could at least fake my way through a 2-year dating relationship before she said, yes, let's do this long term.
Okay, wait, I want a little timeout because I have as the solo guy, I have a slightly different perspective. I actually don't think you consider a makeover, the outward physical makeover, to date better or to date up. I think you do it for yourself.
That's true.
In the sense of
I would agree.
You will when Mark cut his hair. So he had, that show. What's the Bell show?
Saved by the Bell.
Oh wow!
He had the hair, the Zach Morris hair. And what happened was the Zach Morris hair was great when he was in college. It just wasn't good when he was 32. Or whatever year. What year did you cut your hair?
I was probably 34,
35, which is a tendency for guys, they sort of get stuck in the decade that they were dressing for their 20s, you know what I mean, as an adult. When Mark cut his hair, first of all, Mark has great hair. When Mark cut his hair, so when you went in, he actually had a fancy hairdresser, and he went in and said, what exactly did you say to her? Do you remember this?
I said, you can do whatever you want. I just need a big change and have at it. And she was like, this is my dream.
Oh, wow.
And she gave me, I mean, this was back in 2008, 2009, 2010. And so the Caesar, the shorter hair, I had this long floppy mess, right, that I couldn't control. And she just chopped it off. And I remember I had a haircut appointment at about 1:00 in the afternoon. I went back into the office and I was in a meeting and I walked in late because I always walk in late to meetings. And I sat down and people that I had worked with for years were sitting across the table at me, and they were just, it was as if I was unrecognizable.
Wow.
And they were looking at me in ways that probably coworkers shouldn't look at you, right? And it was all because of this significant change to my presentation. And that was just the first step in this transformation and it gave me more confidence. Yeah. I knew I wasn't going to be teased by Pete anymore, which was a huge thing, right?
And I'm not bringing this up because I think you necessarily, Kevin, need a haircut. I actually do have a podcast called Dude, Get a Haircut. That's a fun listen. But
this is a hair transplant. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
No,
I've had 3 hair transplants. Shout out to Dr. Bauman. Yeah.
All right.
And it's not just about the hair. It's just
but that's
confidence.
In Mark's case, it was the hair. Yes. In someone else's case, it's something else. It's their facial hair. Or it's the clothing that they wear, or the car, their car
the
is
cologne they've been wearing for 20 years.
Yeah, they still wear Dracar Noir or whatever it is, right? And so. But you need the friend.
That's right.
Sometimes to go, Kevin.
Yeah.
It's time.
That's right.
So
I found that in women more. I mean, that's one of the things, in addition to therapy, because I went to I've had a stronger relationship with my family members, but it's hard to go to a priest for counseling, for somebody. And then most people, as soon as they hear you got divorced, they're thinking about their own relationships. But I have a few women that have been good sounding boards, and they're the ones that'll tell you how to, dress and how to get back into the dating and how to use Bumble. And, they're my guardrails, if you will.
Yeah.
Those are part of that social circle that supports you. That's really important.
Yeah.
So let's get to this picture of Kevin. What'd you
Are you now looking at the photo?
Do I need to pull it up?
You don't need to pull it up. You can go by your memory, because actually your memory probably is better than you looking at it, if you know what I mean.
And for those of you just listening and not seeing it, he's tall, striking, sort of a Dorito body.
Yeah. Mark, you're pausing.
So you want me to critique him and go to town?
Just say, what I'm saying is, no, I don't want you to criticize him. I want you to say, what if you think there's something working, if you think there's, is this fine? Should we move on?
Yeah.
Am I belaboring this? What's going on?
Yeah. No, well, I think, I'll be blunt. I hope you can screenshot us, or at least I'm curious to see what you look like. Because why did you give him that photo, I guess? This is almost unrecognizable.
He asked me for a full body. I thought it was for a whole nother show. But no, you know what that's from is I needed, it was actually more work related. I needed some, headshots for work. So I'm a little bit, nerded out there.
Like I know you disclosed your age already. Yeah. Without hearing what your age is, I would say you were probably late 40s, early 50s on looking at you right now on this video chat. And when I saw the photo that Pete sent, it looks like you're 62 years old.
Oh,
right.
Well,
I mean,
it was a year ago. That could have something to do with it. It was a year ago, and I was in probably one of the lowest points. Yeah,
it's almost unrecognizable. Wow. I mean, just like it's like I'm looking at two different people as I look at you right now. I can't see if those jeans fit you correctly. I mean, I didn't know that jeans were supposed to fit people correctly until I started working with people. And so I think that's, I think you're holding your cell phone. That's as cliche as it comes. And you got there's a number of things that I would change. You're sitting in a rock in the woods. Well, okay. Is this the one that we're talking about?
Yeah. I'll add one, for example, is like you're wearing the classic middle-aged man sweater with the high collar and the quarter zip, so to speak, which I would say this is like, that's fine if you're going on a walk in the woods. But if you're going out,
which he is in this photo, in his defense, he's in the woods.
Right.
I know. Right. So, okay. Well, maybe this is going horribly awry. This is not how I thought this would go. Kevin, where do you think your weak spots are on the outward appearance type stuff?
I think if I was healthier, when I was working out regularly, I would hold my shoulders up high. I was, more energetic, slept better, etc. Mm-hmm. So I think take care of the physical stuff. You'll take care of the, in terms of, outwardly, again, is it, it's clothing, it's, the way you project hair. Part of it's the corona. I mean, seriously, all I have to do is put on a decent shirt and light myself up. But on the dating scene, I've gone on dates, it's okay. You immediately want to go back to 1996 and then you realize the world's changed.
Yeah.
No more Seinfeld, black jeans.
Well, that's the other thing is a lot of times, especially in our age group, is we grew up with very baggy clothes.
Yeah.
And we've dressed for comfort first. And I think the recognition is that a lot of times that if you get something that fits well, that's tailored and built for your body, it not only looks good, but it still remains comfortable.
Yeah.
And then you also have that confidence. Because when you're a guy, if you're a skinny guy in baggy clothes, you just look like a skinny guy in baggy clothes. And if you're a bigger guy in baggy clothes, you just look like a bigger guy in baggy clothes.
Right.
Right. There is no disguising who you are. The world still can see this, and it just looks schlubby.
Yeah. I think on that note, Pete, and again, I don't want to, I want to make sure our listeners understand that there's certain privilege in this conversation, right?
Indeed.
We all have jobs. We all have resources. So I want to recognize that not everyone can afford to be talking about what type of clothes you're wearing, right?
Yes.
And so that being said, I had a friend who, again, in this transition, who gave me tough love and said, and I don't think he said it in a disrespectful way, but he worked with me for a long time. He probably saw that I was wearing similar outfits to work all the time. And so he said, I have a professional shopper. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but she works for me at a Macy's or a Nordstrom, or I don't know what store it was. And she basically, you meet with her for 10 minutes. She doesn't charge you anything. And you talk about what your size are, what you like to wear, and then you come back a week or two later and she's got 32 different things laid out for you. She, of course, gets a commission on everything that you purchased that day, and you pay a little bit more than you probably would normally. And for me, that was a big shift because I'm, historically frugal. But it transformed how I looked and how I carried myself. And she said, and I still remember this, she said, I can tell just by looking at at you that you spend time in the gym, you exercise, you want to be in good shape. And I said, yeah. She goes, why aren't you wearing clothes that show that off then? Mm-hmm. Like, and that, for me, I needed someone to say that. Mm-hmm. And so I suddenly went from wearing extra larges of everything to larges or even mediums for some. I was like, I can't fit in a medium. She said, put it on. Let's see. And she's like, look how great you look. And I was like, I do look good with the medium.
I have a forthcoming podcast. I think it'll come out after this one, but about wardrobe. So I think we should move on.
Yeah, of course.
I would say this. There is a tendency for guys especially to say, it shouldn't matter what I wear. It shouldn't matter because it's not who I am. Who I am is my personality and my other stuff. But
they will say that.
Dudes, it matters. And
yes.
And it matters because people don't even recognize that they're using it as a cue to judge you.
Yes.
And sometimes they are using it as a cue to judge you, which is if this guy can't even take care of this, what else can he take care of? And so
that's right.
I recognize your point, Mark. It does come. I mean, I grew up very poor and I had to you sometimes have to be very creative and work a little harder to find deals and to do this and to scrounge up some money for a little bit of tailoring and so on. So I recognize that. I do think it's money well spent for your own, how you feel and how you behave in the world. And,
I agree.
And so on.
Hey, I'm proud of something. Can I share?
Yes, please.
Yes.
I'm a Marshalls shopper usually,
okay.
Like Amazon or whatever. Well, I decided, and it just arrived yesterday, to treat myself to 3 pairs of Brooks Brothers boxers. And then was able to throw away the previous pairs that were probably 2 decades old.
Yes.
So that's a step in the right direction.
Buy 3 more.
Go for 6 pairs?
You can never have too many pairs of underwear, and you can never... Like, think about how much comfortable you are.
Yes. So here's a perfect example of something that people who've gone through a divorce or people who've gone through a long-term relationship that ended and moved on know that other people don't. Like, when you date someone new and you're not wearing new clothing, the thought crosses their mind, who else has seen these boxer shorts? Or who else has he gone to, right? I mean, this is a thought that's been shared with me. And so when you upgrade your wardrobe, you're taking more notes.
Oh, I'm writing that one down.
But I mean, when you upgrade yeah, it makes perfect sense. Like, I don't want some belabored, repackage. I want a fresh new version of this individual. And I know you said in an email to Pete when we talked, Pete originally introduced us to say, hey, this is going to be your subject. You called yourself, Kevin 2.0.
You're finding Kevin 2.0.
And I think that's a great way to look at it. I would never put that on someone. That's my role isn't to completely transform someone. It's to work with them, male or female, to figure out how can we, just like Pete's podcast, how do you live a remarkable life? How can we upgrade you in ways that you would want to do? I love the 2.0 analogy. If people are comfortable with it, I would never say it per se about someone else that I'm going to completely transform.
It's just an upgrade, but that's not a transformation.
It's an upgrade. No, it's
just
very nice.
It's a new software release.
Yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned going on a few dates. Like, you are, I would say, several steps ahead of where, like, some of the folks that I work with. I think that's very clear. If you were going on dates, you've been separated for over a year.
That was hard. I mean, what's your average? What are you finding as average? Because I didn't want anything to do with it for a year or so, and then
that is completely. So I get that question a lot. When do I go dating again? When am I allowed to go dating again? Who do I date? At what point in the dating do I disclose that I'm divorced? Like, how do I put it in my Bumble, bio? How do I share what when? It varies from person to person. It varies from how you're comfortable. I have some clients who, as soon as the decision is made to separate, that they are back on that train, dating anyone and everyone. And I have other folks who, like, I was one who I didn't kiss anyone until the divorce papers were signed, sealed, and submitted to the court, and I got the declaration that I was officially divorced. I think it was the next day I went and smooched someone. I mean, that was almost a year.
I don't understand that. I don't understand why some people put the, everything around the paperwork. Did you just not allow yourself until?
I think that was my coping mechanism. Oh. I needed something to say. For me, Pete knows this. I I'm a big flirt. I love to engage people in conversations. I talk to everyone. That's one of the messages I would want to say to you. But I'm sure that without disclosing all the dirty details of my situation, I'm sure I had people who probably thought that I made some mistakes in my marriage from a fidelity standpoint. And I wanted to be able to say with pride, I'd never kissed one person in my 9 years of marriage right until the day when everything was finalized. I was completely monogamous. And so for me, it felt good, kind of, and it wasn't like an F you to people who didn't think I could be faithful, because people had given me that feedback in the past when I was young and probably not the best faithful person. But that's why I waited. That doesn't mean everyone should wait. That doesn't mean the people who date right away are problematic, or the people who wait for years before they date again. I've got one friend who hasn't dated since the divorce and will probably go to his grave without dating, and he's completely fine with that. So I think it's really an individual conversation that you have with a therapist, that you have with a coach, that you have with a confidant, whatever. But the thing that I was going to get back to you on to say, now that you've been on dates and everything, what I tell people all the time is you talk to anyone and everyone all the time. Whether it's the barista at Starbucks, whether it's someone you sit next to on a plane, doesn't matter if they're a 75-year-old man or a 28-year-old woman or everything in between, kids, you just engage them and have these conversations with strangers, because then when that amazing person walks past you or gets on the subway car with you, then suddenly you're not stumbling or fumbling over what you're going to say. You've been practicing for this moment for years.
Yeah. I want to address one thing that Kevin seemed to come up, or maybe Mark, you had said it, but it is this idea of if you and again, my thing and Mark's thing is you take care of yourself first, and you become the best version of yourself. And then that next step, if you want to include someone in your life, becomes that much easier. Yeah. But the idea is to be honest about where you're at and what it is that you're looking for. Because one of the tough things, I think, is especially on the apps, it's a lot of women will say, I'm looking for a relationship. And that's in part because they're given all these options. None of them are really good. Relationship is probably the best one and the ideal one for them.
They need a sub menu for that.
That's exactly.
So many different things. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. I'd be like, I want a relationship, but I'd be open to friends with benefits with the right guy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That kind of thing. But, or a new platonic friend or a business partner, or, you know what I mean? And so on. But I think it's really important, especially if, to say, look, I'm very recently divorced. This is all completely new to me.
Yes.
I'm enjoying my time here, but I'm not ready to rush into something again. If you're not ready to rush into something again, and then if the person keeps seeing you, then they have full information.
Yeah.
In that sense. And I think that's the best that you can do with a sort of imperfect system.
Yeah, it's this. I don't want this podcast, I don't think Pete or Kevin does either, to be about dating or giving dating tips or anything like that. But to your point, I remember, so the texting was something new when I was single. And so that was something that never was in existence before, I was married. And so when I started dating and I realized, no one picks up the phone to talk, you just send texts, and where are we going to meet? And so I remember this speaks to that, like, how many days do you wait and all that. So what do you say? And I remember I sent a text to someone once who I had just met, and we exchanged numbers, and I waited, I don't know what the appropriate days was at that point. And, and I just said, I've been out of this for a while. Yeah. I'm really quite not sure when to send a text or how many days to wait to send a text, but let me know when that's the right amount of time, and I will send you that text. And she immediately responded and was like, it's right about now. Yeah. When can we meet? It's like,
that's endearing.
I think being vulnerable and being sincere and being truthful about your situation is, I think, really important.
Can I say this? This is really important. People, men and women, but especially women, to be sort of stereotypical, are so used to being lied to and people misrepresenting their intentions, their abilities, their situation in life, that when you are honest, kind but honest, self-deprecating and honest, they will respond positively, because they'll go, well, I can trust Kevin. And it really goes a long way.
And you have to put yourself out there, right? Mm-hmm. And for divorced people and people who've just got out of a long-term relationship, that's not easy.
Yes.
You've been wounded, regardless of whose fault it was. Everyone's to blame in these situations, and 90% of the time. We all have missteps that we made along the way, right? Mm-hmm. And because that hurt is so tangible and impactful, and how you bounce back from it, it's not easy. So to kind of be vulnerable again as you meet someone new who you've known for 2 hours is really a risk that people sometimes have to take. And I hear that a lot from people that I work with.
I'll give you one pro tip, which is the best way to approach text, and from a dating standpoint, in my opinion, is you use it to flirt and make plans. It's not a place to be like, how was your day, and have chit chat that you would normally have when you come home from work and so on. That's
Pete's advice.
That's my advice
for people over 50.
I think for anyone. But let's hit one more of these rocks. Do you think, Mark?
Yeah, well, I would go a different direction.
Please.
I mean, we can talk offline about if he wants to get in deep about some of the rocks. I think the other thing that especially, again, he's a little out of the ordinary with how long it's been. I sometimes see people fairly soon after a separation or after a divorce. The feelings of failure are immense, I think, across the board. Yeah. There's I have failed.
Shame. Yeah. Shame.
Yeah. Everyone talks about, Pete and I have talked about this in the past, about a failed marriage is like a common two words that go together all the time. It's a terrible phrase. And so I think I spend a lot of time with clients kind of reshaping that narrative about a failed marriage and how it was a failure. Quite frankly, I think failed marriages are the ones where people are still married to each other and are miserable. Yeah, and there are a lot of those people.
Agree.
Yes.
Agree completely. Yeah.
There's
so I look at it and I talk to people about, I think what you've done with your marriage or your relationship that you or your partner had ended, that takes a lot of guts, and you have to be brave. And I would want you to look back on it as a success. You stayed with a person for a long time. You had wonderful kids that came out of it. You have good memories. But you both came to a realization that this chapter is closing, and the success is going to be your happiness moving forward, and not dwelling on all the missteps and the mistakes that you've made. And I think it takes a long time for people to realize that. The feelings of failure and how I screwed up, especially like you mentioned faith. My dad's a retired Lutheran minister, and Pete mentioned I was the first in my family. And so you have faith plays a whole other thing of that. But really, there's this sense of failure. And then the other big piece is the sense Pete talks about, I think on podcasts I've listened to, about the difference between being alone and being lonely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think there's so much I hear from people all the time, like, well, I don't want to burden people with my struggles. Like, they have their own issues in their lives, and I don't want me to cry on their shoulder. They don't want to listen to me. And so what I do is I flip it around and I say, tell me the name of your best friend. And they give me a name or whatever. And I said, if Sally went to you and said, I'm really struggling with XYZ, relationship, job, whatever, and I'm just need someone to talk to, how would you respond? And she's like, oh, I would respond right away. That's what I do all the time. I'm that type of friend. And I said, so why would you think that your friends aren't those types of people who would let you cry on their shoulders and lean on, So I think sometimes you get caught in this cycle, the sneaky hate spiral, I like to call it, where
Sneaky hate?
A sneaky hate spiral where you just keep getting deeper and deeper into your insecurities and your failure, and it's hard to get out of it. You need to have someone stop the cycle and say, hey, I'm here, let's go out. I can't tell you the number of times where people have come up to me weeks or months or years later and said, you invited me to go out and grab a beer at the local pub or watch that sports game or go for a hike on that day, completely got me out of the house, made me think about life in a different way. You listened to my concerns, and it was just like an average day for me. I didn't think it was a big deal, but when someone's in that sneaky hate spiral and they can have a stop to it, it can be transformative.
That's great.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. I want to echo a few sort of general principles that I've talked about for solo that might be useful, Kevin, for you to hear, and for listeners to get a refresher on. So one of the first things that I say is that single people this is Bella DePaulo's phrase, but married people have the one, single people have the ones. And so I like the idea of making a team. So we talked about the value of a therapist, for example, as a member of your team. Having a good barber or hairstylist is a member of your team. But then also these teammates also extend to friends and family and so on. And I think that it takes work to cultivate. It's easy to hire a financial planner, but it takes work to cultivate friendships and family. And those are relationships that are worth cultivating. The second one is, and I think you alluded to it a little bit, is I like this principle of try to create more than you consume. And so natural tendency when we're sad, especially, is to take in, to binge watch and to have a cocktail and all these things. But, like folks like Mark, may watch some sports, but Mark is creating all the time. So he's got a full-time job, and then he also has his coaching, and then he's putting together trips, and he's putting together Kentucky Derby parties. He's a creator, and what creation often does is it has this engaging factor. It revs you up, but then it also, some creations bring people together. And then the last one is, I think, this idea of living on your edge. And that this idea of living on your edge is where you're not bored, but you're not completely stressed out. And I think a choice to get a divorce is an act of living on your edge.
Yes.
It's really an act of living on your edge. And then the finding Kevin 2.0 is an act of living on your edge, and it's an act of creation. And I think it's important to frame these things in positive ways, the way Mark tends to think about this. That
absolutely.
A failed marriage is an unhappy marriage that never ends versus an unhappy marriage that ends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Kevin, I want to turn this around for the last few minutes. I'm going to ask you a question, and then I want to see if you have anything for Mark there. When we did a little pre-interview just to get caught up, and you offhandedly said, I'm an anti-hero. Do you remember saying that?
I said that?
You said that.
I said that?
And I don't know I didn't know if it was a joke or if it's something that you actually believe that is sort of part of your identity.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I mean, you answer it.
I don't think of you as an anti-hero. I actually think of you as a hero. I certainly don't think of you as a villain, right? So these are the three classic.
I play a really good one on stage, though, if I might add. Usually with a British accent.
I have no doubt. I think of you as a hero. I see you as a good father. I see you as a competent professional. I see you as having virtuous goals. And so anti-heroes lack the virtue that heroes have.
Right.
And we might like an anti-hero. They may be cool and exciting, but you don't want an anti-hero as your friend.
Right.
You don't want your sister going out with an anti-hero. And so I'm glad. I thought you were just joking when you made that quip. But I think it's important to think about life in that kind of way, that there is the hero's journey is you have a call to action. And there's a natural tendency to resist it, but the hero eventually seizes on that call to action.
Well, actually, stay with that word for a second, resist, because that's one of the questions I was going to ask Mark, is that, the common themes that you see for people. So like some people, they're in a bad relationship, they don't want to risk themselves again. What are the things that you see getting in people's way, either to find a new relationship or to find comfort in being solo?
Yeah. Well,
it's a big question.
We need. That's a great question. I don't think we have enough time on the podcast.
That's a whole nother one. It's a sequel. Yeah. Let's do it.
Well, I think it's individual, right? For some people, I can do some of these takeaways from past clients and say, here are some summaries, but each one I think has a different villain, if you want to keep with that analogy, or a demon that they're working on, right? And so I think I would really encourage you to reflect on what your stumbling blocks have been as opposed to me just kind of saying where the themes are with what have been other people's stumbling blocks and work through some of those. I think sometimes, I did a number of sessions in therapy, and all my therapy times were basically when I was in relationships that I didn't feel good about or didn't know how to get out of, I think, to put it bluntly. Pete's laughing and shaking his head. I care deeply about people, and sometimes I would have a hard time walking away from relationships that might not be forever relationships or even healthy relationships. And some of that, I think the people I would be with would say that I had commitment issues is a common thing. And I just felt like there were some hesitations or stumbling blocks for me to commit long-term to these folks who really wanted to be committed to long-term. Mm-hmm. And so that was my demon or something I had to work through. And it really wasn't until someone who really is a perfect match for you, and not everyone has perfect matches. It's hard for me to talk about my own relationship now with other people because, quite frankly, it's amazing, and no one wants to hear that, right? Even Pete, who's, he doesn't want to hear how great, because he talks about, we talk about marriage and this type of thing with his solo work all the time. And I wasn't sure I would ever get married again. And I was happily living remarkable lives. I was more of a serial monogamous, I would say, mm-hmm. But I would be fine in between relationships. I didn't need to get married again. And then you meet the person who's your person, and you're like, how would I not want to be with this person forever?
By the way, I don't disagree with that perspective. I don't like it when people force it.
Yes.
Because they think that being with someone is better than not being.
Well, there's the thing. That's the common thing is, Peter, you and I talked about this before the podcast, and that to me, whether or not you were looking to be in another relationship, there is absolutely no risk and plenty of rewards to just be comfortable.
That's right.
Being by yourself, because there's nothing sadder than somebody that just jumps off of a relationship desperately like a heroin user seeking something else to fill the void.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Kevin, do you have another question? And then we're going to bring this to a close with a special offer for listeners. That's my
good. Is that if it's a pair of jeans, then, at year 2, what do you need to be thinking about between 2 and 3? I'm taking life in segments. That was the good advice I got from a friend of mine. Yeah. Because I've usually thought of marriage as the final stop. That's life. And now I'm trying to be open to the fact that there's a season.
Yep.
So what based on what you're hearing, should I be thinking about for the next year?
Yeah, year 2. So I think some of it depends on who you meet and what comes into your life. Like I like to tell people to be open to the unexpected, be open to, you never know who you're going to meet. I mean, everybody's love story is so unique and interesting, it seems like, when I talk about how you meet someone. There's no rhyme or reason. I know lots of people are meeting online with the apps and everything, but the connections that people form, and so it's hard for me to be able to kind of draw that path and say, here's where Kevin needs to be at the start of year 2 and at the end of year 2 or moving into year 3. There's one of my clients was very much adamant that he was just going to go the solo route. He's going to hate that I'm outing him right now on this podcast, but he hasn't missed one podcast of solo, and he was swearing by it. And sure enough, as luck would have it or not have it, he met someone, and now he just told me today on a call this morning that he's known this individual less than 90 days and just signed a year lease with her to live together.
Hey, do not stop listening, whoever you are.
Yeah, no, I was just about to say, Peter, you lost a listener there.
No. I'm sure he will still listen. But I would have never guessed that would have happened, given the conversations that we had leading up, and I helped him get back in the game, right? I was one of the ones working with him. He was the one who I mentioned earlier who said he still thinks about that advice I gave him to talk to anyone and everyone all the time. He says he thinks about it all the time.
Great. I like that advice, and I like tap into where your success comes from.
Yeah, that's great.
I think that's the piece that I would say, just be open to what life brings you and continue doing some of the things we talked about today. Continue to work on yourself in different ways, not just, as Pete said, not just for future partner you may have, if that's what you're open to, but just for yourself. I mean, as you walk into a room, if you're doing some of the things we discussed in the last hour, people are going to notice, and you're going to feel better about it. Your kids are going to feel better about it, and it's just going to make your life that much better to live with yourself.
Yeah. I'm going to add something. It's going to reveal my own bias, Kevin. So I think Mark has recognized that you're, all things considered, doing quite well.
That's right.
I mean, and you are.
It's funny you say that because I don't think,
Yeah, I think that's fair. But
we can get into the deeper stuff.
No, I know,
longer.
but I think you're right. I'm doing better than I sort of give myself credit.
And I think better than a lot of people in a similar situation to you. And part of it is because you have a good foundation. You're smart. You're successful. You're funny. You're a kind person. And so these are foundational elements to your
above
character.
average looking too.
But
I was waiting.
But
for
I
that.
will say this: this is my own personal bias. I often ask people, especially my students and my listeners, I say, "Is your health number one?" And I see health as the foundation for living a remarkable life. And so I would only add to Mark's well-said advice, which is, I think the number one thing that you can do is to make your health a priority. And that is improve your eating, cut back on the drinking, move your body more, and as you've already acknowledged, get better quality sleep than you're probably getting. And that is worth sacrificing other things in order to get.
Well, it's a prerequisite in some ways to other things too, because if you don't have the energy for taking care of yourself,
it's hard to be
there's
happy.
Probably a reason.
Yes, it's hard to be happy if you feel terrible. It's hard to create things if you feel terrible. It's hard to be a good father if you feel terrible, and so on. And so I think that's. And by the way, it's a lot more fun to dress a fit body than it is to dress a non-fit body.
Or undress.
And especially undress. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with working out and eating well to look good naked.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up. So for those of you who've listened, who are in a similar situation as Kevin, Mark has offered a free consulting session to the first person who reaches out to me requesting it. So just contact. No, Kevin, you do not count.
I do have an advantage because I can do it right now.
Send me an
Sorry, folks. Offer's over.
Send me an email or a social media message. Get to me. The first person that gets to me gets a free session with Mark where he'll take you through this, and he'll actually send you the intake form in advance and all those kinds of things. So with that, I want to say, Mark, we found a way to get you on the podcast, so congratulations. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
Kevin, thank you for being a good sport and for approaching this with authenticity and vulnerability. That's an act of bravery.
Absolutely.
I think
Thank you.
That's really great.
And Mark, it's great meeting you. And Peter, I love what you're doing here. I mean, you've got a lot of happy listeners. I could tell from the comments. So you're doing the world a good thing.
And one last thing, I've recently launched a message board on the solo page at petermcgraw.org, where I have topics about single living and about living a remarkable life, as well as threads for each of the episodes. So if you guys want to...
Including photos.
Okay. Can you post the name of the jeans in the thread?
I can do that.
Yeah,
okay.
I think we can find that.
Well, I will... It varies on your body shape and size, right? Certain jeans fit Pete McGraw very differently than they fit Mark Fernie.
Yes, that's indeed right. But the coloring is, let's skew a little dark rather than light. That's I think that's a fair one. Okay. Well, with that, I want to say thanks to both of you and cheers.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to Solo, the single person's guide to a remarkable life. For more about our guests and show notes, go to petermcgraw.com. Please subscribe and share with your single friends.